The door slammed so hard I felt it in my chest. Father Gabriel's voice, low, commanding, nothing like the gentle tone I'd grown used to, cut through the dim chapel like a blade. "You confessed loving a dangerous man, Sienna. Tell me his name." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Because standing before me wasn't the priest who'd listened to every secret I'd whispered through that wooden screen for the past year. It was Luca Moretti, the man who owned half this neighborhood, whose name people only spoke in careful whispers. The man I'd been confessing about. He'd heard everything. Every single thing. My legs felt like they might give out. The votive candles flickered along the walls, casting his shadow long and dark across the marble floor. He looked different in this light, no longer the composed businessman who'd walked into my flower shop with rain in his hair. Here, surrounded by saints and stained glass, he looked almost otherworldly. Dangerous in a way that made my heart hammer against my ribs. Sienna. My name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a threat all at once. His name. Now. But I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. Because the implications were crashing over me one after another, each wave more devastating than the last. He knew about my panic attacks. He knew about the nights I couldn't sleep, crying over my father's death. He knew about my fear of being ordinary, my dreams of leaving the neighborhood, my guilt over lying to my mother about being okay. He knew everything. And I'd told him myself. Let me go back. Let me explain how I ended up here, trapped between the altar and a man who knew my soul better than anyone alive. My life wasn't supposed to be complicated. I worked at my aunt's flower shop on Belmont Avenue, lived in the apartment above it, went to church every Sunday like my mother raised me to. The neighborhood was tight-knit, everyone knew everyone, and the Moretti name hung over it all like weather you couldn't escape. Protection, they called it. Control, whispered others. I'd grown up with stories about the Moretti family the way other kids grew up with fairy tales. Cautionary tales whispered over espresso at the corner cafe. Mrs. Carlucci 2 doors down wouldn't say their name out loud, just crossed herself whenever someone mentioned them. My mother would always change the subject when I asked too many questions, her hands going still over whatever she was cooking. "Some things, Sienna," she'd say, "are better left alone." I'd been good at leaving things alone. Good at keeping my head down, helping Aunt Rosa with the shop, attending Sunday Mass, having dinner with my mother every Wednesday. My life was small, predictable, safe. I never cared much about any of it until the panic attacks started. They came out of nowhere 6 months after my father died. Sudden. Crushing. Like drowning in the middle of solid ground. I'd be arranging roses and suddenly my hands would shake so badly I'd drop the shears. I'd be walking home and my chest would tighten until I couldn't see straight. The first time it happened, I thought I was dying. Actually dying. I was in the back room of the shop, stem shears in hand, when the room started spinning. My vision tunneled. My heart raced so fast I could hear it pounding in my ears. I dropped to my knees on the concrete floor, gasping, convinced this was it, a heart attack at 26, just like my father. Aunt Rosa found me there 20 minutes later, curled up on the floor, tears streaming down my face. "Mia cara," she'd whispered, helping me up with surprising strength for a woman in her 60s. "This isn't your heart. This is your grief. It has nowhere to go, so it's eating you alive from the inside." But knowing what it was didn't make it stop. If anything, it got worse. The attacks became more frequent, more intense. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat, unable to remember how to breathe properly. I'd be fine one moment and the next I'd be in the bathroom at the shop, hands braced against the sink, watching my reflection blur as panic consumed me. I started avoiding things. Avoided crowded places. Avoided dating, not that anyone was asking. Avoided anything that might trigger that terrifying loss of control. My mother noticed but didn't push. Just started bringing extra food to Wednesday dinners, watching me with worried eyes across the table. Aunt Rosa kept suggesting therapy, leaving pamphlets on the counter when she thought I wasn't looking. My aunt suggested I talk to someone. A therapist felt too formal, too expensive, too exposing. But confession? That I could do. That was private. Sacred. Besides, I'd grown up going to confession. I knew the rhythm of it, the dim booth, the screen between you and the priest, the quiet absolution. It was familiar territory. Safe, in a way therapy never could be. So I started going to St. Catherine's every Thursday evening, when the chapel was nearly empty and the city noise felt far away. I'd chosen Thursdays specifically because that's when the church was quietest. No evening mass, no choir practice, no crowds of elderly women saying the rosary in the front pews. Just me and the empty chapel and the confession booth waiting in the alcove like a dark promise of relief. The first time I stepped into that confessional booth, my palms were sweating. The wood was old, smooth from decades of hands sliding along its surface. The screen between us cast shadows across everything. I could smell incense and old wood and something else, something that reminded me of my grandmother's house. Safety. History. Permanence. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Childlike. Scared. There was a pause on the other side of the screen. Long enough that I wondered if anyone was even there. Then, "Take your time, child." His voice was deep, measured, somehow both distant and intimate through that screen. God listens without judgment. Something about the way he said it made my shoulders drop. Made the tightness in my chest ease just slightly. His voice didn't have that performative quality some priests had, that carefully cultivated gentleness that always felt slightly rehearsed. This was different. Real. Like he actually meant it. I told him about the anxiety. About feeling like I was drowning. About the guilt I carried for not being enough for my mother after Dad died, for not having my life together at 26, for feeling lost in a world that expected me to know exactly where I was going. The words poured out of me in a rush, tripping over each other, desperate to escape. I told him things I'd never said out loud. About how I'd found my father that morning, coffee still warm in his mug, newspaper open to the crossword he'd never finish. About how my mother had screamed, a sound so raw it didn't seem human. About how I'd stood there frozen, useless, while the paramedics worked on a body that was already gone. "I can't make it better for her," I whispered, my throat tight. "Every Wednesday we have dinner and she pretends she's fine and I pretend I'm fine and we're both drowning in our own houses and I don't know how to save either of us." He listened. Really listened. Not with empty platitudes but with questions that made me think deeper about what I was feeling. "When you say you can't make it better," he said carefully, "what would better look like to you?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I had no idea. "I don't know," I admitted. I want to fix it. I want to go back to before. I want my dad to still be here doing his crosswords and arguing with my mother about whether to plant tomatoes or peppers in the garden. I want things to be normal again. Grief isn't something we fix, Sienna. It's something we learn to carry. The way he said my name, gentle, familiar, like he'd known me longer than 30 seconds, made something in my chest crack open. "Fear often disguises itself as failure," he continued. "Perhaps what you're experiencing isn't weakness, but your heart trying to tell you something important." Nobody had ever put it like that before. I sat there in the dark booth for a moment, letting his words settle over me. My heart trying to tell me something. Not my body betraying me. Not my mind breaking. But my heart, trying to communicate in the only language it had left. "What's it trying to tell me?" I asked. "That's for you to discover. But I suspect it has something to do with the fact that you're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to not be okay. You're allowed to need help without being broken." When I left that evening, the panic hadn't disappeared. But something had shifted. a small crack in the armor I'd been wearing since my father died. I came back the next week. And the week after that. Thursday evenings became the anchor point of my entire week. 30 minutes in that dim confessional where I could say anything, admit anything, without seeing judgment in someone's eyes. Without disappointing anyone. I started looking forward to Thursdays the way some people looked forward to vacation. I'd plan what I wanted to talk about, rehearse conversations in my head while I arranged flowers or walked home from the shop. Sometimes I'd write things down on scraps of paper, afraid I'd forget the exact words I wanted to say. Father Gabriel never made me feel small. He asked about my day, my work, my dreams. He challenged me when I was being too hard on myself. He reminded me I was stronger than I believed. "How was the shop this week?" he'd ask. And I'd tell him. About Mrs. Chen who came in every Tuesday for roses for her husband's grave. About the teenager who'd spent his last $20 on flowers for his first date. About Aunt Rosa teaching me her grandmother's technique for keeping peonies fresh longer. "You talk about flowers the way other people talk about children," he observed once. "With tenderness. With pride. They're living things," I said. "They deserve tenderness. So do you." Those 3 words hit me harder than any sermon ever had. "You carry more courage than you realize," he told me once. "I hear it in your voice, even when you doubt yourself." "I don't feel brave," I admitted. "I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days." Courage isn't the absence of fear, Sienna. It's showing up anyway. You show up every day. You care for your mother even though you're grieving too. You keep your aunt's shop running even when panic threatens to swallow you whole. You come here and speak your truth even though it terrifies you. That's courage. Something shifted in me during those sessions. I started sleeping better. The panic attacks became less frequent. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I'd pull out my old supplies from the back of my closet, dried out tubes of paint, brushes with stiff bristles, canvases I'd bought with such hope for years ago. At first, my hands shook too much to hold the brush steady. But gradually, week by week, I found my rhythm again. I painted flowers mostly. Not the perfect, Instagram-worthy arrangements from the shop, but wild, imperfect blooms bursting from 2 small vases. Petals falling. Stems breaking. Beauty in decay and chaos. I started painting again, I told Father Gabriel one Thursday. "What do you paint?" "Flowers. But not the pretty ones. The ones that are dying. The ones people throw away." "Why those?" I thought about it for a long moment. "Because they're still beautiful. Even when they're falling apart. Maybe especially then." "Like you," he said softly. I didn't know how to respond to that. But then Luca Moretti walked into my flower shop on a rain-soaked Tuesday, and everything got complicated. He was taller than I expected. Broad-shouldered, dark hair slicked back, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. 2 men flanked him, silent and watchful, their eyes sweeping the shop like they were cataloging exits and potential threats. The bell above the door was still chiming when the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I need flowers," he said, his eyes scanning the shop before landing on me. "For a funeral." My hands were already reaching for the sympathy arrangements before I processed the weight of his presence. Everyone in the neighborhood knew who Luca Moretti was. Knew what he did, even if nobody said it outright. Mrs. Carlucci crossed herself when his car drove past. The bodega owner on the corner always had fresh produce waiting when Luca's men came by, never asking for payment. Protection money, some called it. Others just called it the cost of doing business. I'd seen him before, of course. From a distance. Getting out of black SUVs. Walking into restaurants where reservations were mysteriously always available. But never this close. Never in my space. White lilies and roses? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Professional. The way Aunt Rosa had taught me, treat every customer the same, no matter who they are. Something more personal. He stepped closer to the counter, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne and rain. My uncle died. He raised me. He deserves more than the standard arrangement. Something in his voice, a crack in that controlled exterior, made me look up. And that's when I really saw him. His eyes were striking. Dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that felt like being seen through. But underneath that hardness was something else. Grief, maybe. Or exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from carrying weight you can't put down. I recognized it because I saw it in my own mirror every morning. Tell me about him, I said softly. His expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. What? Your uncle. What did he love? What would make him smile? The two men behind him exchanged glances. Like I'd just broken some unspoken rule. Like nobody asked Luca Moretti personal questions. But Luca studied me for a long moment, as if trying to figure out if I was serious. His jaw worked, tension visible in the muscle there. Then, quietly, he loved his garden. Grew tomatoes and basil. Said working with the earth kept him humble. There was something raw in his voice now. Unguarded. Like mentioning his uncle had stripped away a layer of armor he usually wore. Did he teach you to garden? I asked, already moving through the shop, trailing my fingers along stems and petals. He tried. I was terrible at it. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Impatient. Wanted the tomatoes to grow faster. He'd say, Luca, you can't force nature. You can only create the conditions for growth and then wait. I nodded, already moving through the shop, gathering stems. Basil for devotion. Rosemary for remembrance. White roses for reverence. And I'll add olive branches, for peace. You know the meanings? He sounded genuinely curious now. Every flower has a language, I said, selecting the freshest stems. Most people have forgotten how to speak it, but that doesn't make it less real. I worked quickly, my hands steady as I built the arrangement. This was where I felt most confident, not in conversation or social situations, but here, with living things that made sense. Flowers didn't require small talk or pretense. They just required attention and care. He watched in silence, and I felt the weight of his attention like heat against my skin. It should have made me nervous, this dangerous man and his silent guards watching me work in my small shop. But instead, I felt focused. Present. The same way I felt in the confessional, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I wove the basil between white roses, added sprigs of rosemary, tucked in olive branches so they framed everything like a promise. The arrangement came together like a story, one of love and loss and the hope that peace might still be possible. When I finished, I turned to find him staring at the arrangement with something unreadable in his eyes. His throat moved as he swallowed. For a moment, he looked younger. Vulnerable. Like the weight he carried might actually break him. It's perfect, he said quietly. What do I owe you? 300. He pulled out a billfold, thick with cash, the way my father's never was, and handed me $500 bills. Keep it. Sir, I can't. You gave my uncle dignity. That's worth more than flowers. His eyes met mine again, and something in my chest tightened. Thank you, Sienna. He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. He probably knew everything about everyone in this neighborhood. But hearing him say it, my name in his voice, felt different than I expected. Not threatening. Not possessive. Just personal. Like he'd been holding it carefully and finally decided to use it. He left before I could respond, his men following like shadows. I stood there for a long time after, staring at the empty doorway, my heart beating strangely fast. Aunt Rosa emerged from the back room, where she conspicuously disappeared the moment Luca walked in. "You okay, Mia Cara?" "I think so." I looked down at the cash in my hands. "He overpaid." "He does that." She took the money from me, counted it, then tacked 300 into the register and handed me back 200. "For you. You earned it. Rosa. You gave him something he needed. A way to honor his uncle. That's worth more than flowers." She patted my hand. "But Sienna? Be careful. Men like Luca Moretti, they're complicated. Beautiful and dangerous, like those poison flowers you're always reading about." That Thursday, I went to confession like always. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." "Welcome back, Sienna." That familiar, comforting voice. "What weighs on your heart tonight?" I hesitated, my fingers twisting together in my lap. The wood of the booth suddenly felt too close, too confining. "I met someone this week. Someone I probably shouldn't be thinking about as much as I am." Silence. "Then, tell me about him." Where did I even start? How did I explain the way the air had changed when he walked into my shop? The way his grief had felt so familiar it ached? He's complicated. Dangerous, maybe. Everyone talks about him like he's something to fear, but when he was in front of me, I didn't feel afraid. I felt. I struggled for the word. Seen. "And this troubles you?" "Everything about it troubles me." The words came faster now. He's not the kind of man I should be drawn to. He's not safe. He's not appropriate. But when he talked about his uncle, when he looked at the arrangement I made, I saw something in him. Something real. Something human underneath all the power and control. And you wonder if that's real or if you're imagining it. Exactly. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs. I don't know if I can trust my own judgment anymore. What if I'm drawn to him for the wrong reasons? What if I'm just lonely and mistaking intensity for connection? What does your heart tell you, Sienna? I pressed my palms against my knees. My heart tells me he's hurting. That underneath all that control, he's barely holding himself together. But that's probably just me projecting. Or perhaps you see something in him that others miss. Perhaps you recognize pain because you've known it yourself. His words settled over me like a blanket. Is it wrong to be drawn to someone dangerous? I whispered. Dangerous is relative. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is denying what we truly feel. A pause. But be careful, Sienna. Some men carry shadows that can swallow others whole. Make sure you're not sacrificing yourself to save someone who isn't ready to be saved. The words felt prophetic. Warning and permission wrapped into one. How do I know the difference? I asked. Between saving and sacrificing? Saving is about helping someone find their own strength. Sacrificing is about losing yourself in the process. His voice softened. You've spent the last year learning to find yourself again after your father's death. Don't lose that progress for someone else's redemption. I left that evening feeling unsettled. Confused. Because Father Gabriel was right, I did see something in Luca Moretti. Something that called to the broken parts of me. I told myself to forget about it. To focus on my work, my life, the steady rhythm I'd built. But then Luca came back. It was 3 weeks later. Late afternoon, the shop nearly empty. The bell above the door chimed, and he walked in alone this time. No guards. No armor. Just him in dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look less like a kingpin and more like someone who might be tired of carrying crowns. I need another arrangement, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. For what occasion? Does it matter? I set down the ribbon I'd been cutting, meeting his eyes directly. Yes. Every arrangement tells a story. What story do you want to tell? He leaned against the counter, and for the first time, I saw him without the armor. Exhausted. Human. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. His hair was less perfectly styled. He looked like someone who'd been awake too many nights in a row. What arrangement says thank you for reminding me there's still beauty in the world? My breath caught. The air between us felt charged suddenly. Heavy with something I couldn't quite name but could definitely feel. Like the moment before a storm breaks, when the pressure builds and builds until you can taste electricity on your tongue. Sunflowers, I said softly. For adoration and loyalty. Yellow roses for friendship and joy. And eucalyptus for protection. Perfect. But neither of us moved. We just stood there, the counter between us like a barrier and a bridge all at once. Why flowers? I asked. Why not just say thank you? Because words feel inadequate. He ran his hand through his hair, messing it up further. Because you didn't have to be kind to me. You didn't have to ask about my uncle or create something that honored him. You could have just handed me the standard arrangement and taken my money. But you didn't. Everyone deserves dignity, I said. Especially in grief. That's exactly what I mean. His eyes held mine. You see people. Really see them. That's rare. I didn't know what to say to that, so I turned away and started gathering flowers. But my hands weren't quite steady anymore. I built it while he watched, the silence between us charged with something I couldn't name. When I finished, I wrapped it carefully and handed it to him. Who's it for? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual even though my heart was pounding. You. He placed the arrangement back in my hands, his fingers brushing mine. The touch lasted half a second too long. Half a second too long and not nearly long enough. Luca. You don't know what it meant, what you did for my uncle. Most people see me and see a transaction. A threat. You saw past that. His eyes held mine. I wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to. I know. I wanted to. Then he left, and I stood there holding sunflowers in confusion, my heart racing so fast I thought it might break through my ribs. Aunt Rosa appeared from the back room again. She had a sixth sense for dramatic moments. That man is falling in love with you, she said matter-of-factly. Don't be ridiculous. I'm 73 years old, Sienna. I know what falling looks like. She touched the sunflowers gently. The question is, are you falling back? I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because the truth was too terrifying to say out loud. That Thursday, I practically ran to confession. Father, I don't know what to do. The words spilled out before I could stop them. He came back. He gave me flowers. He looked at me like I mattered. And I can't stop thinking about him. But he's not someone I should want. He's dangerous. Do you feel unsafe with him? No. That's the problem. I feel safer with him than I have in months. When he looks at me, I feel like I exist. Like I'm not invisible. But that can't be right, can it? That can't be love. It's probably just, I don't know, adrenaline or projection or Sienna. Father Gabriel's voice cut through my spiral. Stop telling yourself what you should feel and listen to what you do feel. I pressed my forehead against the screen, tears burning my eyes. I feel like I'm falling. Like if I let myself feel this, there's no going back. Like it'll ruin me. Or perhaps transform you. What if he doesn't feel the same way? What if he does? I left that evening more confused than ever, because Father Gabriel was pushing me toward something I was terrified of. Toward Luca. Toward the very thing I'd come to confession to resist. Summer slid into autumn. Luca kept coming to the shop. Always with an excuse: flowers for a business dinner, an arrangement for his mother, something for the church fundraiser. But his visits got longer. He'd stay and talk. Asked about my paintings. Told me stories about his uncle, about growing up in the neighborhood, about the weight of running an empire nobody wanted to admit existed. "Your uncle sounds like he was a good man," I said one evening while arranging dahlias. "He was the best man I've ever known. Patient. Kind. Everything I'm not. You're more like him than you think." He looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "How do you figure?" "You honor his memory. You care about this neighborhood. You came back to a flower shop 3 times not because you needed flowers, but because you needed something else. Connection, maybe. Humanity." I met his eyes. "That's not something a monster does." "People see me as a monster," he said one evening as I closed the shop. "Maybe they're right. I don't think you're a monster. You don't know what I've done, Sienna." "Maybe not. But I know how you talk about your family. How you remember your uncle. How you've never once made me feel small or afraid." I locked the door, my hands trembling slightly. "Monsters don't do that." He stepped closer, and the air between us felt electric. "You're too good for this world. For me. Don't tell me what I am." His hand lifted, almost touching my face before he stopped himself. His fingers hovered near my cheek, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "If I cross this line, I won't be able to go back." "Then don't." But my voice shook, betraying how much I wanted him to. For a moment, one breathless, infinite moment, I thought he would. Thought he'd close that final distance and kiss me right there on the street outside my shop, consequences be damned. But he didn't. He dropped his hand. Stepped back. And something in his expression looked like grief. He left. And I stood there wanting to scream, to run after him, to demand he stop treating me like something fragile he might break. That Thursday, I told Father Gabriel everything. The visits. The almost touches. The way Luca looked at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. "I want him," I whispered. "God help me, I want him so badly it scares me. But he keeps pulling away, and I don't know if it's because he doesn't feel the same or because he's trying to protect me or..." "What if," Father Gabriel interrupted gently, "he's terrified of ruining you?" "Then he's an idiot." A low sound came through the screen, almost like a laugh. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he knows his world is darkness, and he can't bear the thought of dimming your light." "I don't need protecting. I need honesty." "Then demand it. You're stronger than both of you realize." Those words echoed in my head all week. The next time Luca came to the shop, I didn't wait. "Why do you keep coming here?" I asked, setting down the shears with more force than necessary. "You know why?" "No, I don't. Because one minute you look at me like I'm everything, and the next you run away like I'm poison. I'm tired of guessing, Luca. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this." His jaw tightened. "You don't want this, Sienna. You don't want me. Stop telling me what I want." My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. "Do you have any idea what it's like? To feel something this intense and have the other person act like it doesn't exist? I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From you? From feeling something real?" I stepped closer, my heart hammering. I'm not afraid of you, Luca. I'm afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Something in him broke. I saw it in his eyes, the moment his control shattered. He crossed the space between us in 2 strides, his hands cupping my face as his lips crashed against mine. The kiss was desperate, consuming, like he'd been holding back for months and finally couldn't anymore. I kissed him back with everything I had, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like mint and coffee and something darker, something addictive. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead pressed against mine. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "Then let's make it together." His thumb traced my jaw. "You have no idea what you're getting into. So show me." And he did. Not with words, but with the way he held me like I was both breakable and unbreakable. With the way he kissed me again, slower this time, like memorizing every second. "I've wanted this since the moment you looked at me like I was human," he murmured against my lips. "Since you gave my uncle dignity when the world only gave him judgment. Then stop fighting it. If I let myself love you, Sienna, I won't be able to let you go. Then don't." The weeks that followed were stolen moments and secret meetings. Late nights in my apartment above the shop. Early mornings when he'd show up with coffee and watch me paint. Drives through the city with his hand in mine. He showed me pieces of himself nobody else saw. The way he visited his uncle's grave every Sunday. How he put 3 kids through college whose parents couldn't afford it. How he kept the neighborhood safe in ways the police never could. But he kept parts of himself locked away too. Conversations he'd take in another room. Phone calls that made his jaw tighten. The weight I saw in his eyes some mornings, like he carried ghosts I couldn't see. I told Father Gabriel about all of it. About falling in love. About the fear and joy of being seen so completely by someone. "He makes me feel alive," I confessed one Thursday. Like everything before him was just waiting. "Is that crazy?" "Love often feels like insanity," Father Gabriel said. "But that doesn't make it wrong." I've never told him I love him. I'm afraid if I say it out loud, it'll become too real. Too much. Or perhaps it'll set you both free. That night, I decided I'd tell Luca. That I'd stop hiding behind fear and just be honest. But I never got the chance. It was a Tuesday evening. I was closing the shop when I heard shouting outside. Male voices, angry and sharp. I looked through the window and saw Luca in the street, facing 2 men I didn't recognize. His stance was tense, dangerous. One of the men said something I couldn't hear. Luca's response was low, threatening. Then I saw it, the flash of metal. A gun. Everything slowed down. I watched Luca move, faster than I thought possible, disarming the man with brutal efficiency. The crack of bone. A scream. Within seconds, Luca's men appeared from nowhere, restraining both men. And Luca, his face was cold. Empty. Nothing like the man who held me tenderly, who laughed at my terrible jokes, who kissed me like I was oxygen. This was the other Luca. The one the neighborhood whispered about. He looked up and saw me in the window. Our eyes met, and something in his expression cracked. I stepped back, my hands shaking. He was in the shop 30 seconds later, reaching for me. "Sienna. Don't." My voice came out strangled. I need a minute. Let me explain. You broke his arm. I heard it break. He pulled a gun in my neighborhood. Near you. What did you expect me to do? I don't know. Tears burned my eyes. I know who you are. I've always known. But seeing it, Luca, God, seeing it. This is why I tried to stay away from you. His voice was raw. This is why I said you deserved better. Because this is my world, Sienna. Violence and choices nobody should have to make. And I can't change that, no matter how much I want to. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop shaking. I'm not afraid of you. Maybe you should be. I'm afraid of loving someone who lives this close to death. I'm afraid of losing you. That's different. He stepped closer, his hand reaching for my face. I would never let anything happen to you. But who protects you? Something in his expression shattered. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I'm sorry. God, Sienna, I'm so sorry. I held him back, my face pressed against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Fast. Hard. Alive. I love you, I whispered into his shirt. I love you, and it terrifies me. His arms tightened. I love you too. More than I thought I could love anything. We stood there in the dim shop, holding each other while the city moved around us, and I knew, whatever came next, we'd face it together. I needed guidance. Needed to talk through the fear and love tangled in my chest. So that Thursday, I went to confession early, needing Father Gabriel's wisdom more than ever. Father, I told him I love him, I said, my voice shaking. And he said it back. But I saw who he really is. What he's capable of. And I'm terrified that loving him means accepting a world I don't understand. Accepting violence and danger and... The confessional door on the priest's side slammed open. My heart stopped. Because standing there wasn't Father Gabriel in his robes. It was Luca, still wearing the black shirt and slacks I'd seen him in that morning. No. No, that wasn't possible. Hello, Sienna. My entire body went cold. What? Where's Father Gabriel? Luca leaned against the doorframe of the confessional, his expression unreadable. There is no Father Gabriel. Not really. The world tilted. What are you talking about? He stepped into the booth, the priest's side, and I saw it clearly for the first time. The way he fit there. The way his voice sounded exactly the same as it had every Thursday for the past year. My uncle was the priest at St. Catherine's for 30 years, Luca said quietly. When he got too sick to serve, I took over the confessional. Nobody questioned it. Nobody looked closely. And it gave me the perfect way to keep my finger on the pulse of the neighborhood. To know who needed help. Who was struggling. Who might be a threat. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press them together. You've been Father Gabriel this whole time? Yes. Every confession. Every Thursday. Every secret I told you. I heard all of it. The room spun. I pressed my hand against the wooden screen between us, the screen that had always felt like safety, like separation, like sacred privacy. You knew, I whispered. When I first talked about meeting someone dangerous. When I confessed falling for you. You knew it was you. Yes. Rage and humiliation and betrayal crashed over me in waves. You let me pour my heart out. You gave me advice about my own feelings for you while pretending to be someone else. You, God, Luca, you manipulated everything. I didn't plan this. His voice was rough, desperate. I didn't plan you. You were supposed to be just another person in the neighborhood. Another confession I'd file away. But then you came back. Week after week. And you were so honest, so vulnerable, so fucking beautiful in your truth. I tried to stay detached. Tried to just be the voice through the screen. But then you walked into my life twice, once as my confessor, once as yourself, and I couldn't separate them anymore. I stood up, my legs barely holding me. So what? You thought you'd just keep playing both roles? Keep lying to me? I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By letting me confess my love for you to you while pretending to be a priest? My voice broke. Do you have any idea how violated I feel right now? How used? He stepped closer, anguish written across his face. Sienna, please. The door slammed so hard I felt it in my chest. I repeated his words from earlier, understanding now why he'd been so desperate. You knew I was coming. You knew I'd find out. I couldn't keep lying to you. Not after you said you loved me. Not after. He ran his hand through his hair, looking more broken than I'd ever seen him. I never meant to fall in love with you. But I heard your soul before I ever touched your hand. I knew you deeper than anyone, and then I met you in the flesh and you were even more than I imagined. How could I not fall? You should have told me. When? When you were falling for me at the shop? When you were confessing your fears to Father Gabriel? When you finally told me you loved me? His voice cracked. There was no good time, Sienna. Every moment I didn't tell you made the lie bigger, but I couldn't lose you. I couldn't watch you walk away from both versions of me. I pressed my hands over my face, trying to process everything. Every conversation. Every confession. Every piece of advice he'd given me about my own feelings for him. You asked me what arrangement says thank you for reminding me there's still beauty in the world, I said, my voice hollow. You already knew how I felt. You'd heard me confess it. Yes. And when I asked you why you kept pulling away, you said you were trying to protect me. But you weren't protecting me from your world. You were protecting yourself from me finding out the truth. Both things can be true. I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd held every secret I'd ever spoken. Who'd counseled me through my darkest moments. Who'd fallen in love with me twice. I can't, my voice broke. I can't be here right now. I pushed past him, out of the confessional, down the aisle of the empty church. He didn't follow, and somehow that made it worse. I didn't leave my apartment for 3 days. Didn't answer calls. Didn't open the shop. I replayed every conversation in my head. Every confession. Every moment of intimacy with both versions of him. The worst part? Understanding that he did know me. That the connection I'd felt with Father Gabriel was real because it was Luca the whole time. That every tender moment, every piece of wisdom, every time I'd felt truly seen, it was all him. But it was all a lie too. My phone buzzed constantly. Luca's name lighting up the screen over and over. I deleted the messages without reading them. On the 4th day, there was a knock at my door. I almost didn't answer. But something made me look through the peephole. Luca stood there, looking like he hadn't slept. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. He held a single white rose. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. I'm not here to defend what I did, he said immediately. I'm not here to make excuses or ask for forgiveness I don't deserve. I just need you to know the truth. All of it. I crossed my arms, my throat tight. When you first came to confession, you were just another voice, he continued. Another person I was gathering information from. But then you came back. And you weren't looking for absolution or telling me things to impress me. You were just honest. Beautifully, painfully honest. You talked about your fear of being ordinary. About missing your father. About feeling like you were drowning in expectations you never agreed to. His voice roughened. And I found myself looking forward to Thursdays. Found myself thinking about what you'd said days after you left. You became the most real thing in my life, and you didn't even know who I was. That's the problem, Luca. You knew everything about me, and I knew nothing about you. You're right. It was unbalanced. Unfair. Wrong. He stepped closer, his eyes holding mine. But then you walked into my world outside that booth, and I couldn't stay away. I told myself I'd keep my distance, that I wouldn't cross that line. But you looked at me like I was human, Sienna. Like I was worth something beyond fear or transactions. And I was selfish enough to want both, the you who trusted me with your soul and the you who made me feel like I could be more than what my name demands. Tears burned my eyes. You can't have both. That's not how this works. I know. I know I fucked this up beyond repair. But I need you to understand, I didn't fall in love with two different people. I fell in love with you. Just you. Every version, every moment, every confession. He held out the white rose. For truth. For purity. For the honesty I should have given you from the start. I took the rose, my hands shaking. I don't know how to trust you again. Then don't. Not yet. Let me earn it back. His voice broke. I'll spend the rest of my life earning it back if you let me. I need time, Luca. I need space to figure out if any of this was real or if I just fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll wait forever if I have to. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, every word I spoke to you as Father Gabriel was true. Every piece of advice. Every moment I told you that you were stronger than you knew. That was me seeing you, Sienna. The real you. And loving everything I saw. Then he left, and I stood there holding a white rose and a shattered heart. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. I went through the motions, opened the shop, made arrangements, smiled at customers. But everything felt muted. Colorless. I stopped going to confession. Stopped going to church entirely. I painted instead. Dark, violent canvases full of confession booths and shadows and hands reaching through screens. My aunt asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. But I wasn't fine. Because the truth was, I missed him. Both versions of him. I missed the voice through the confessional that made me feel understood. I missed the man who held me like I was precious. I missed the way he looked at me, like I was the only real thing in his world. But I couldn't separate the betrayal from the love. Couldn't figure out if what we had was real or just an elaborate manipulation. One evening, I found myself standing outside St. Catherine's. The chapel was empty, the confession booth dark. I stepped inside the booth, my side this time, and sat in the silence. The wood was cool under my palms. The screen still bore the shadows I remembered. I don't know what to do, I whispered to the empty space. I love him. God help me, I love him so much it physically hurts. But I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I should. No voice answered. No wisdom from beyond the screen. Just silence and my own heartbeat. Then, quietly, from the other side, I don't know if you should either. My breath caught. Luca. But I know I love you, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. I know that every moment with you, in this booth, in your shop, in your arms, was the most real thing I've ever experienced. I know I'd give up everything to have you trust me again. And I know that if you decide I'm not worth the risk, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that I wasn't brave enough to tell you the truth sooner. Tears streamed down my face. You broke something in me, Luca. I know. And I'll spend forever trying to put it back together if you let me. I pressed my hand against the screen, and a moment later, I felt his hand on the other side. The barrier between us somehow more present and more fragile than ever. I need honesty, I whispered. Complete honesty. No more secrets. No more lies. No matter how ugly the truth is. I promise. No more secrets. And you have to give up the confessional. No more pretending to be Father Gabriel. Already done. I've stepped away from St. Catherine's entirely. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of this decision. The risk. The potential for more heartbreak. But also the possibility of something real. I want to try, I said finally. I want to believe we can build something honest. But it's going to take time, Luca. I can't just pretend the last year didn't happen. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. We sat there in that confessional for a long time, hands pressed against opposite sides of the screen, breathing together in the darkness. Finally, I stood. Walked around to the priest's side. Opened the door. He looked up at me with those dark eyes, vulnerable and exposed in a way I'd never seen. No more screens, I said. No more barriers. Just us. The truth, no matter how messy. He stood, pulling me into his arms. Just us. And when he kissed me, it felt like a confession. Like absolution. Like coming home to something I'd been searching for my entire life. I love you, Sienna, he murmured against my lips. Every version of you I've known. Every secret you've trusted me with. Every moment I've been allowed in your life. I love you too. Both versions of you. Even the parts that terrify me. We held each other in that empty church, two broken people trying to build something whole. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more hard conversations. More moments of doubt. More struggles to reconcile who he was with who I needed him to be. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Because sometimes love isn't about perfect beginnings. It's about choosing to stay even when staying is hard. It's about truth, even when truth is painful. It's about two people seeing all of each other, the light and the shadows, and deciding the risk is worth it. As we walked out of St. Catherine's hand in hand, the evening city lights spreading before us, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the ending. It was just the beginning of something real.